Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Since recently I am preparing for a very important tournament, I won't be able to follow the footsteps of these very recent top events. I won't be able to record videos about these top events. So I am pre-recording this series. And this series, like the games and or the positions in this series that I am sharing with you guys, are all things that I learned at my chess school. And these are all chosen carefully by my coach, who is an international master, very strong. And he taught all these things to us. And now I'm going to share these things with you guys. And I think it is also a really nice way for me to review the things that I have learned at my school. All right. So today's main topic is about the King's Indian defense. Now, usually my coach likes to use one game or a few games to emphasize in whole opening, a specific variation, that is. And today we'll be taking a look at this game, where it's played between Georg Meier against Sebastien, who are both very strong grandmasters. All right, let's start this game. Now, today we'll be learning how to face the King's Indian defense with the white pieces. Here, white start with knight f3, knight f6. The move order doesn't matter because we will transfer into the standard position anyways. And after d4, and here a slight emphasis is that usually when white plays e4, this means that e4, white does not want to allow black to play the d5 move, which will turn into the Grunfeld defense. Like here, if you go d4, it will give black two options: either just to go d6 to keep just to play the King's Indian defense, or go d5, which will be the Grunfeld defense, that is, which is more aggressive. And some people, they just don't like to face against the Grunfeld as white, and would like to first of all play e4 and then play d4. Short castle, bishop e2, e5, short castle. Now, usually here, black has a couple of options, basically, either to take with e takes d4 or go knight c6. The third best option is actually to go knight bd7, which is the line that we'll be taking a look at today. Now, this line is not as common as the other two variations, but it is still played by a lot of people. Knight bd7. So this move is actually, what does this move mean? This move means that if white goes d5 here, then black will be able to jump the knight to c5 immediately without going for a5, knight a6, knight c5. And also, even if white doesn't go d5, black can still the knight on d7 can always have outposts, not outposts, but can always have routes to go knight b6, or just keep the knight there and probably go c6 in the future, and also supporting the e5 pawn. In the game, rook e1 was played, very normal move, and here black played c6. Now, worth noting is that here for black, as you have to know in general, that you don't go rook e8, especially you don't go rook e8 in situations where white in situations where the white hasn't taken on e5 yet. If you go rook e8 right now, of course you're threatening to take on d4 on the next move, and white will if white takes on e5, then this will be good for black, because after knight takes e5, something like knight takes e5, d takes e5, and the rook is of course helpful on e8. But what if white here just goes d5 to close up the center? Then black's idea is actually just to go f5 in the King's Indian, and your rook is now on e8. This means that later on you'll have to get the rook back to f8, but you're just wasting a move if you do that. That is why you always play rook e8 after white has opened up the center with d takes e5. And in the game, c6 was played, very logical, and after bishop f1, e takes d4. Now here basically, again, black has two main options: either to take on d4 or go a5, just the very normal way. Both are fine actually. E takes d4, you need to know more about this this variation, because you're opening up the position, and this means that the position will become more concrete. and you have to know more about this opening. Alright, in the game, e takes d4 was played, and here, of course, white takes with the knight, because, like, if you take with the queen, you're just under this pin, and it's always very annoying when you're under a pin, and here, black can go for a discovered attack with knight d5, even though black is not winning any material, but of course, it will, like, somehow, like, mess up white's pawn structure. Like, if you get away with the queen, then after knight c3, b takes c3, you see you have double pawns, and the bishop is also very strong. And of course, as white, you don't really want to allow that to happen, and you just play knight d4. The d6 pawn is a weakness in black's territory, but of course, it's not that easy to, like, attack it, because there's always 95 ideas, like, to protect the d6 pawn. Alright, in the game, rook e8 was played. See, you see, like, now the center is open up. This means that black is now able to get the rook to e8, because, like, if d takes e5 or e takes d4 was played, this means that f5 is likely not gonna be played in the rest of the game, or at least this is not going to happen in the middle game, because there's just no attacking, like, plans after f5 for black. And now I just go rook e8 to put some pressure on the e4 pawn. This is the idea, basically. Bishop f4 attacking the d6 pawn, and here, I want you guys to think. You have two options here, to go knight c5, knight e5, or knight c5. And I want you to choose between these two moves. Both of these moves are playable, but one is better than the other. In the game, knight c5 was played, and this is the move that is slightly worse. The better option is to go knight e5, and why? Because you go knight e5 because you blockade this bishop, you blockade this diagonal. If you go knight c5, okay, maybe, like, you're getting your knight to a very excellent place and also attacking the e4 pawn, but this bishop is still putting a lot of pressure on the d6 pawn, and here, like, as played in the game, white has some ways to stay better. But I'm not going to show that, like, to show the game right now, you guys. Let's see what happens after knight e5. Knight e5 is better because now if white takes on e5, there's just d takes e5. Of course, this is better for black. And if you just leave the knight there, but the knight is actually really strong on e5, also putting some pressure on the c4 pawn. If you just leave it there, let's say you just go for something like h3, doesn't do anything, probably black will now just go bishop e6 to attack the c4 pawn, and if you take on e6 here, black will just take with rook e6, even though they say that in the King's Indian defense, black's light square bishop is a very important attacking piece, but now you just sometimes you just have to switch these rules. You see that the bishop on g7 now is actually a very nice bishop as well, even though it is now being blocked by these two knights. But later on, if these two knights have moved away from this diagonal, this bishop on g7 will be really strong, putting a lot of pressure on this whole diagonal. So you have to look further into the future. With that, like, of course, rules you have to follow, but sometimes you need to switch your knowledge of rules. Like, you don't have to always follow these rules, because sometimes rules, they're just not the best moves. Like, they don't lead to the best moves. Alright, knight c5 was played in the game, however. It is also okay, but knight e5 is just better. Slightly better, of course. Queen c2, defending the e4 pawn. Now, the main problem is that knight on c5 can always, like, face problems like b4, and you'll have to get the knight back. In the game, knight g4 was played, very logical, opening up this diagonal for the bishop. Well, I think the only reason that black doesn't go knight e5 here is because he doesn't want to blockade this bishop, which is, like, a logical idea. But, yeah, just pure calculation, though. Queen d2, knight g4, queen d2, now defending the d4 knight, and knight e5. You see, like, black is actually maneuvering these knights in a very interesting way, getting this f6 knight to the e5 square instead of this knight. And actually, these two knights cooperate pretty well, and there are even, like, knight d3 threats if white doesn't, like goes away with queen c1, for example. But always, you have to be aware of b4 ideas. In the game, rook a d1 was played. Still, white is mainly trying to attack the d6 pawn because that is the main and only weakness in black's territory so far. Queen b6, attacking or putting some pressure on the b2 pawn, and h3 was played. Now h3 is actually a very necessary move because there's always some threats like bishop g4 in the future or knight g4, and it's also just very necessary to play a pawn move like this in front of your king because it can avoid later on middle end games back rank problems because you can now run away with the king. a5 was played, very logical, going a4, a3, trying to gain more space on the queen side, and now bishop e3 was played. Bishop e3 is very, the usage of this move is actually really clear, just to, put pressure on this diagonal. And that's the problem with queen b6, because now, it is on the same diagonal as the knight, and sometimes it can lead to problems. But right now, it is still fine, and here black made this slight inaccuracy, knight d7. Now, you should have just, black should have just gone for this a4 move. Just follow your a5 plan. The plan just keeps on going, keeps on flowing, and it should be fine. But if you go knight d7, of course this is the second best move, but attacking the e4 pawn, but your pieces are somehow a little bit a little bit passive, and you can see the c8 bishop is still blocked inside completely. Alright, but after knight d7, it's still not a big deal. But now, after queen c2, first of all, defending the e4 pawn, and a4 was played. Now, before we keep on taking a look at the game, I want to tell you guys something about the king's Indian defense. You are most likely be told that in the king's Indian defense, white, in general of course, white attacks on the queen side and black attacks on the king side. And of course, white just attacks with b4, c5, a4, these kinds of things, and black attacks mainly with f5. But it's not always like that. For example, in this position, it is also being reached with this is also reached with the opening king's Indian defense, but it doesn't seem like it anymore. How can white be able to attack on the queen side, where black is already pushing the pawns this high up the board? But now, you have to switch your knowledge now. White is actually here going to attack on the king side, because you can see now most of black's pieces are scrambled on the queen side. And this means that, of course, if you're trying to keep following the rule and attack on the queen side, it's just not going to work. It's just going to help black activate the pieces. But if you attack on the king side, it will be very, black will be struggling to get the pieces towards the king side because it's just way too passive, these pieces, blockading each other's route. So now you see, white is going to attack on the king side. And how is that going to happen? Just by pushing the pawns. And that is what happened in the game, f4. Queen b4. Now, actually, queen b4, it is the start of disaster. Even though it is still one of the best moves in this position, but I think in black's mind, if black is just trying to always forming, if black's having this idea, then this idea will be the start of the disaster. Because the queen, of course, is attacking the c4 pawn. And black's idea is to go knight b6, but you can see that it's just too far away from the action on the king side. And what if something happens on the king side? Then your queen will find it really hard or take a bunch of moves to get to the king side. But at that point, it's going to be too late. And the queen on b4 also sometimes faces problems of getting trapped. Because these two knights control a lot of squares, and the only way for the queen to get back is either with queen b6 or queen a5 back. But what if these squares are being controlled by white's pieces? Like bishop d2, for example. Things like this can happen, of course. In the game, bishop f2 is played, and knight b6, attacking the c4 pawn. But actually here, what I think is best for black is just to go a3, just to follow your idea. Well, probably here, white can go b3, but at least you achieve your idea of getting a very high-pushed pawn. But however, knight b6 was played in the game, and now white gets to play a3 to kick the queen away, and now queen a5. The queen and the knight are, you just see that they are on very bad squares. g4 was played. Even though the EVA bar still says this is close to equalization, I mean, white is of course slightly better, 0.7 advantage, but it's not a winning advantage, of course. But I think in human eyes, this is already about 2 points, because why? These pawns are first of all looking very scary, and f5 is unstoppable kind of. Also, black's pieces on the queen side are just way too misplaced. and passive. So this is what's going to happen. Bishop d7, first of all played. Now this is actually a bad move. Black should have get the bishop to e6 instead. Just do it like, like attack the pawn. And after something like, I don't know, knight b1 to defend the pawn, and probably rook a d8. At least first of all, get your pieces out. Get your pieces out and then try to defend for black. But in the game, bishop d7 was played, developing the bishop to a round square because it blockades the square for the knight to retreat back in some situations. And after f5 now, the attack on the king side is just unstoppable for black because the pieces on the queen side are just getting like way too far from the action. Rook a d8, developing the pieces, but it's just too late. And after bishop h4, both sides repeated for twice. But I guess they're just trying to add some time. And after knight f3, finally, I mean, this is very logical, attacking the d6 pawn and also threatening e5 on the next move. And here, knight b3, first of all. Now, it's actually, like, there's a great move here by white, and it is queen f2. What is this queen f2 move? So knight b3, of course, there's a huge usage for this move. And black is threatening to go queen c5, actually. Queen c5 check, and it's actually very annoying. So it's best for you to like keep like this diagonal safe. And after queen f2, bishop f8 was played, but this is already just losing. You cannot take on c3 because there's just b takes c3, and don't forget that your knight is still hanging on b6. So everything is hanging here in black's territory, and after queen f2 here, bishop f8, and now another excellent move played by white. It's a quiet move, and it's king h1, but it's the best move. Now, because black is threatening to go for some d5, bishop c5 ideas, and this, like, sometimes you just have to be alert or aware of, like, when your queen and king are on the same diagonal or the same file, the same rank, you should always be aware of like whether your queen and king will be forked or pinned, and that is sometimes very like scary if you like allow that. So you first of all need to like be aware of that, and now you see that black really does have this idea. Then you just go for king h1 to get away from it, and after queen c5 here, e5. Well, this is actually a blunder here, like blundering half of the advantage away. Well, white should have played this actually just to, like get the queen away. Of course, you want to keep the queens on the board because you're just, like you're attacking your opponent's king. You just go queen g2 and then go e5, which is unstoppable. But I guess here white was a bit in a hurry and played e5, but his opponent also didn't get the best move. And I mean, queen f2, bishop f2. Probably after c5, black is still going to be able to hold on, but of course, still under a lot of pressure. But if you're looking at an engine and you're playing all of the best moves, of course, this is going to be a draw. But, I mean, in human eyes, this is just way too, depressing for black. After d5 here, which was played in the game, now there's just queen c2, giving white the chance to run away with the queen. And now this is just going to be losing. Knight takes a4, and black is just losing a bunch of material then. And, yeah. Let's just quickly see, and after knight h4 here, black resigned and white won this game. Now this game, the most important part is the opening part, the king's Indian defense, and also some middle game rules in general, of course. And hope you guys learned these rules. Sometimes you just have to of course, rules are important, and most of the time you follow them, but in some situations, you don't always follow the rules because rules, they don't always lead to the best moves. You need to combine your calculation and the rules together, and also your evaluation of the position. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as this video, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!